The Scout class received a new weapon today in form of the Boys AT rifle, the first of the anti-material rifles, a new class of weaponry again introduced for the Scout class in today's patch. And as such, in typical weapon review fashion, in today's video, we're going to be looking at the stats, the property of the Boys AT rifle, the specializations available and that I would recommend for this weapon, as well as of course how this weapon compares to some of the other Scout offerings out there and how to get the most out of it when using it on the battlefield. Starting off then, as we always do, with a quick disclaimer about the current bugginess of Battlefield 5 since today's patch. If in today's video you notice at any point me ranking up to level 50 for the seemingly 150th time in today's video or in general, or you notice me unlocking level 1 or level 2 of the Boys AT rifle specialization for the second or third time, or you get fed up of constantly hearing plane noises in the background, I do apologize, that is not my magic editing, but instead some of the many new bugs introduced by today's patch for Battlefield 5. Dice please. That aside though, let's start with the stats. The Boys AT rifle has a maximum damage of 100 and a minimum damage somewhere around 75 or 85. The main point here is that between 0 and 100 meters, you've got a weapon that does 100 damage, meaning of course a one-shot body shot kill. A one-shot kill actually in most scenarios, and if you add a headshot on top of that, essentially you're just, well, getting extra points for style really. Now to somewhat balance this out, of course, your fire rate is abysmally low at only 22 rounds available, as well as a relatively limited mag with only 5 bullets in your chamber. Essentially, you've got a bipoded 50 cal here that you're firing at your enemy, and you're doing the appropriate damage that you would expect it to do so, given what kind of weapon it is. Now, the key caveat really isn't even the fire rate of this weapon, because that isn't really an issue when you only need one shot to down your target, and you can engage targets at a range and from cover where really you don't have to face 2 or more at the same time. You can just get back to cover and retrain with the next rifle. The bipod issue, however, is a little bit more limiting, meaning that you really do have to set this weapon up either by going prone or finding a suitable piece of cover, something that is sometimes frustratingly buggy still in Battlefield 5, to actually be able to even fire this weapon in an ADS mode. Much like the MMGs, this weapon isn't ideal if you don't have it bipoded, for a matter of fact, other than in extreme close quarter scenarios where you can essentially just hip fire them down with one shot. This weapon is useless unless of course you ADS. But leaving the stats to one side, let's quickly talk about the specializations available. Now your choices are as follows. In the first set of choices you have either swings or swivels for 15% faster weapon switching, or the recoil buffer, decreasing the vertical recoil of this weapon. Then either you have the choice between the flashless propellant, which reduces your muzzle flash, followed by the machine bolt, increasing the fire rate of this weapon from 22 to 26, or if you go down the right hand side, you'll be able to get variable zeroing, which of course allows you to change the zeroing distance of this weapon, followed by quick reloading, decreasing the reload time of this weapon by 15%. Then between your last choices, you have the armor-piercing bullets, which essentially do more damage against vehicles. If you didn't know, this weapon is capable of damaging vehicles, or you can go for the high-velocity bullets, which increases the muzzle velocity of your weapon by around 10%. Now, I'd love to tell you which specializations I know or think are the best, but thanks to another one of DICE's newly introduced features or bugs, depending on how you see it, progression currently doesn't work in Battlefield 5, meaning that you can unlock level 1 or level 2 of this weapon's progression as often as you want. Not only will you not be able to then go and actually unlock or purchase those specializations, you will also lose all progress as soon as you go to the next round or leave the server. Now, in terms of my personal opinion, objectively, just looking at what is available, I'd say that really it's up to you. Both left and right hand sides seem to have minimal impact on how effective this weapon really is going to be. An increase to the fire rate isn't going to help you much because this is a weapon that is based entirely on choosing one target and taking him out with one shot. And variable zeroing isn't exactly something that you need with this weapon either, because if you're going above 100 meters of engagement distance, really you're doing a disservice to yourself because you're losing your one-shot kill and are essentially operating at a distance at which other bolt-action rifles are much easier and much better to use. That should be noted, this weapon has horrifically bad bullet drop, horrifically high recoil, meaning you can't really trace where your shots are going, and very low muzzle velocity, meaning that it is very much not ideal for taking on targets at medium to long range. The only upgrade that may actually be interesting for this weapon, but again, I can't tell you if it is because I haven't been able to try it out, is the armor piercing bullets, because they increase the damage against vehicles, which currently is very low. The best damage I've managed to do on a per bullet basis is 8 against a stag hound, 6 6 against a more medium tank, and then 4 against something like a Tiger or a heavy Churchill tank. Very much seems to be that the damages are limited according to the class of tank. Now, I have heard reports of people being able to push that slightly higher with very pinpoint accuracy on certain parts of the tank, but the message here is relatively clear. Without any kind of specializations, this is not a very effective anti-tank weapon, especially because you have to bipod in front of a tank, in line of sight of a tank, which is not something I would recommend anybody does in any situation, because you will just get shot instantaneously. Leaving these specializations behind, let's talk about how this weapon performs compared to other scout weaponry available in Battlefield 5. Well, that's really tough to say because this is a very unique weapon. Not only does it have a one-shot kill potential without having to go for headshots, it does that at a relatively wide variety of engagement distances, 0 to 100 meters, and it requires to be bipoded. None of these things are features even comparable to most bolt-action rifles. But what I can say about this weapon is that it essentially severely restricts your mobility and your effectiveness to help push your team onto an objective, or in many cases defend an objective. This weapon is essentially an MMG for the scout class in the way it's played, and it very much suffers from the same team balancing and enjoyability problems if you don't like that kind of gameplay. It also suffers from the same type of balance issues, that because you're prone, because you're bipoded, you're a very easy target for anybody with a relatively accurate bolt action to take out at any range they want to. This is a little bit of a problem. At the same time, you have an amazing amount of damage you can put out on a per target basis, so it's somewhat balanced. But for most people, I think it's not going to be an enjoyable weapon to use just because you constantly have to go prone or deal with the bipod mess that is trying to get that bipod to set up on a window ledge, or even worse, on some kind of natural cover such as rock formations. If I were to be designing this weapon, I would have had it fireable in ADS without bipod, but have limited its actual one-shot potential to either sub 50 meters or sub 75 meters, and have a very, very slow ADS time to somewhat balance it out, but make it a little bit less rigid and unflexible, because as it stands now, and this is how we get into how to make the most of this weapon, this is essentially an exclusively only defensive weapon. It's usable, some would even say very powerful, on linear game modes where you are the defending team on a point. If you're not on a linear game mode or a linear map and you're not defending, you're usually going to have an uphill battle. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't use this weapon effectively, but let's put it this way, other weapons would be a more effective choice in those situations. So in conclusion, this is most definitely not a weapon for me, but if you're a very passive player, likes defending, likes setting up their bipod and waiting for the enemy to come to them, absolutely, this is going to be a fantastic choice for you, and you most likely are going to be relatively successful with it. I maintain the point, however, that any scout player that chooses to go for a slightly more proactive playstyle, using a standard bolt action, heck, even the POA pistol carbine if you have to, is going to be a more effective team player, and in most situations actually score higher on the scoreboard as well, be that in terms of points, or be that in terms of your kill to death ratio. But that pretty much wraps it up for the Boys AT rifle. I'd love to know if you've unlocked it yet and what you think of it if you have, so leave that, as well as of course your usual video suggestions and feedback down below in the comments, or hit me up with it on Twitter. If you enjoyed this video, found it helpful or entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 5 video.